So I went and bought this Admiral table saw. I wanted to get my nephew a table saw, and I bought the Warrior and the Admiral, and I'm going to keep the best of them, of course, and give my nephew the other one. If you're wondering why I don't give it to my son, I offered it to him, and he said, "Why do I need any tools? I'll just come over and use your shop." Kind of a unique approach there. But this is a lot like the Warrior. It has the same general arrangement. It has a fence, and it has a measured scale. A fence that attaches front and back, and it's actually a little different. Just push a little, and it locks. This doesn't do that. You have to lock it. And I had no problems with that. I just want to point it out. When I first got it, the back lock did not touch the table, so it moved a little. Well, I don't want that. How you do that is to tighten this. Once I fixed that and made that touch in the back, then I got this. That's the last thing you want to have happen, is that to come loose in the middle of a cut. So what you do is adjust this so that it goes back further before it locks. So just get your crescent wrench, go from this side, and you want to loosen this a little. Once you loosen that, you can screw this in further and retighten that, and that should make it better. Put it in place. Not going to come loose. And you always want to try this end, make sure it doesn't move. If it moves, you'll be pushing a board down through here, and you'll press that out just a tiny bit, and it'll throw off your cut. Quite a bit different throat plate. The cabinet saw, there's room to take these off and put in a wooden insert. You're a lot more limited on your options on this one. If you want a zero clearance slot here, I would advise you to use a sled. It's just going to work better. If you're ripping like this, a sled's not going to help you that much, but you can make a sled to put over top of this. It doesn't have to be really thick. Put it over top of this and let this still mount, and then you can do it that way. It limits your cut on the saw. So to adjust this one, you got to take the screw out. On most saws, there's some type of a catch on the front. As soon as that loosened up, it fell out. It shouldn't do that. They give you a thumb hole there, but it doesn't work very well. Not much different about this saw than most saws. It has dust collection that catches the dust as it goes down in, sucks it out the back. So I'm going to roll this up. You almost have to raise it all the way to work on the blade. So it's got a riving knife, and it's got a lock. So pull that lock up, and that'll let you tilt it sideways, pull it up. There, it's above your blade. If you're cutting a thicker piece, you want that out more. And you lock it back, and there it's locked. That looks like it's flimsy, but it really isn't. Okay, so we've got to put a blade on. It's pretty simple, actually. This being up or down, I don't think it's going to have a substantial influence on putting the blade on, make it harder or easier, but I will put it down. And there's that dust chute. Theoretically, the dust that's produced by the blade is going to go down through this hole. Some of it will stay on top, but most of it goes down in there. And it's going to hit this dust chute, and there's suction out the back. Okay, so the first thing you got to do is take off the nut. And these are a 5/8 arbor. That's pretty standard. And here's the outer flange. And you can usually get the inner flange off. Actually, that's a nicer flange than I've seen on some of these bench saws. It has a bushing on the back of it to try to keep it stable. That's actually good. So press that in. It doesn't lock anywhere. It just keeps turning. So let's find a blade. Okay, so I went and bought an Admiral blade when I bought the saw. 10-inch 80 tooth, 62724. And it wasn't long after I found these. Bauer, same size, everything, for significantly less. I think this was 24. I got one of these for 20 and one of these for less. They're basically the same blade. I did a review on this, and it cuts really well. It's a thin kerf, works really well, liked it. But since I'd already bought this, I didn't want to take it back. I hate doing that. This is full kerf, so it's a different way of doing things. This will make a bigger kerf, but I'm wondering if it cuts any different, because the Bauer does fine. The Admiral is a little different in that the zero clearance slot is held down by a screw, and they also give you a finger hole. So you actually have to take this off every time. But they were smart enough to make that screw so that it didn't come off. It'll stay there and available. That's an awful easy screw to lose, like on a job site. So we see the dust chute. I like that. And the dust port's in the back. We'll see that in a minute. It's got the riving knife. I've already taken off the arbor nut and the arbor flange. If you don't take these off when it's all the way up, that dust chute kind of gets in the way. Okay, so I got my saw blade. The point of these carbide tips is what cuts, and you want that to go down to hit the wood. Put it in this way with the teeth pointing forward. Put this lever out of the way. You don't have to worry about which side the writing goes on. The teeth's what's important. If you ran it the other way so that the teeth cut on the way up, which that's what it does in the back, if you did that, it would try to force your wood away, and you won't want that. This way it kind of holds it down a little. So you can see it goes on that flange. It goes on the arbor on the smooth place. The flange goes on the outside. Now it's keyed, so it only goes in one way. There you go. And you have the arbor nut. Now, I know I'm blocking this, but there ain't another way to do it. You give you 2 wrenches. They're actually the same size. So remember I said the outer flange was keyed? Well, this goes over the key. And we tighten it up. Now you want these to be tight. Hand tight like that is perfectly fine. Don't try to force it anymore. It's not going to work any better, and it's just going to be harder to get off the next time. So that riving knife is right there. Lock it back in place. That's pretty steady. I had someone on the channel say, how important is it that the riving knife lines up with the blade? Well, very important. If it doesn't, it's not doing its job. Look at that, that's not right. So I gotta undo the lock, hold that up, redo the lock, which you can see that slipped. It's no longer square, so you gotta keep playing with this. The thing is, if you use the motor, if you loosen that, the blade canters over. It swings underneath. Bench saws will do that. This is a bench saw, which means the blade is mounted directly on the motor. There's no pulley system. As this was shipped, it's out of square. So I loosen this knob. Okay, this is kind of hard to show because it's got this big wheel in the way, but there's a knob that locks it in place, and there is this that shows you what degree you are. That's nice, but go by measuring the blade. So here's the knob that I need to tighten wherever it's at, but if I use the motor to put it in place and then I hold the blade, that's not going to work. It shifts. So you have to hold the motor, check the alignment, keep the motor held, and tighten that up. So you need 3 hands. It took me a couple of tries sometimes to do this. Now there's where it goes. I can't hold this measurement tool. I can't hold the motor in place and tighten it up. I only got 2 hands. Let's see if I can use my thumb to tighten that while I hold it in place. There we go. There we go. That's good. And you can't set the straight edge against a tooth because the teeth are offset. You want it on the blade itself, in between 2 teeth. So the blade is now square. So this fits on here, but it's loose. Wow, is it loose. So it has a funny profile here. Profile on this is a little funny. It actually rides on a ridge up from the bottom. Put it on backwards where you could see that there's a space under it. It might be 3/32. My first thought, miter gauge, if it's in a miter slot that loose, doesn't do me a lot of good. I can see some jitter on the board as I'm cutting it. I don't really want that. What I can do is every time I use this, I can press it to the outside. And that way, if there's an error, at least it's consistent. It's always pushed that way. It always keeps the same distance from the blade. I needed to make some runners for a sled. To me, a table saw isn't very good without a sled or a place to attach jigs. And you can have a 45-degree sled, you could have a 90-degree sled. You can have a lot of variations, and you can do a lot with a table saw if you have a place to run jigs through it. I just verified that the blade was 90 degrees. Now this points, that actually points to 0. Usually you have to adjust those. If you have to adjust it, loosen this screw and make sure that is dead on to 0. The hole that this goes through is elongated. It means it's, maybe a 1/4 inch wide, so that you can slide that around. Well, it just so happens that if I slide it all the way this way, I'm still not on 0. So I kind of angled it a little. And it has these teeth, and you can push in, and it'll walk those teeth until you get out to a certain degree. Or you can leave it pulled out and just, it's supposed to be a fine adjust, but I'm not wild about that. And some people complain about the switch, not easily accessible, but in reality, it's an on-off switch. You know where it's at? Once you get used to using the saw, it'll be second nature to go there and turn it on and off. All of these bench saws come with rubber feet to dampen the vibrations. These you just slide in these holes. Those rubber feet help some, but if you have the motor attached to the blade, the motor is most of your vibration. It won't transfer to the table, but it still transfers to the blade and to your workpiece. A remote motor with a pulley has less vibration. Notice I didn't say none, less. Okay, on the back side here, where you store your jig attachments. This is your dust collection, and it has a body that goes and mounts underneath the saw blade. All the sawdust that falls through will be sucked out. This is a new trend on all of Harbor Freight's tools, is to have a place to put all of these accessories on the saw. So that's there, and that'll stay in place, and it'll stay with the saw. They give you this big ass plastic push stick. That goes right there. See how that fits down in that? There's a custom made for it right there. So that works pretty good. That'll hold it in place. And here, your miter gauge goes. But you'll have to adjust this. So all your major pieces are there. On the Warrior saw, they gave you a place to put this on the side. They didn't on this one. Well, there is no positive attachment for this. It's supposed to just sit there. And when you saw, these lift up, go back down. And the back of it is tabletop dust collection. We'll have to try this and see how it actually works. I'm not wild about it not having a positive lockdown. So in using it, it could pop up. It only has to pop off once to cause a problem. If I attach this to the fence, then I can use these bolts to put jigs on this slot right here. Well, the easiest way to get this on is to actually put it through, get you a washer, and put the thumb, and put this nut on. And leave it very loose. Let's do the other one. Okay, this is modular. It goes together this way. It's supposed to be easy to do, quick connect. Now that I have this, I can just put it down over that. That's easier than trying to line up those bolts through that. Tighten these up. Now you'll have to get a second set of bolts for this to actually attach a jig, but they're 1/4 carriage bolts. You have to get wing nuts to put on it, hold stuff down if that's the way your jig works. And you're ready. And the type of saw that this is, I think that this should lock completely down. It will never do that. Because of the way it's molded for the distance front to back, that is never going to go all the way in. But when you lock it, it's pretty steady. They give you holes to tie this down to a bench, but if you're on the job site, you might want to attach it to a portable stand for table saws. And it should attach with no problems. I personally don't like those stands, but they do work okay. So if I'm in the shop, I'll tie those down. It's safer to tie it down because of all the vibration that comes out of this saw. When you first kick it on, then that motor comes on and it'll kind of jerk the saw a little bit. Okay, so I need to get a T-track that actually works. I'm going to 3D print one and see if I can't get one that fits in there fairly tightly. Okay, I did a couple test cuts to get used to how this works. I had a lot of reservations about this popping off, but after using it, not as many. And I didn't put a hose on this because to use this correctly, that hose has to have a 90 and go up so it'll stay out of your work. I'm going to do a test cut and cut a slice off of this, and then I'm going to move this in a little bit and do the other side so I've got two smooth sides. Okay, I like the riving knife. I do not like this. It hides the work from me. It's supposed to be safe, but it hides the work from me. Now that is smooth, but in reality that is an artifact of the blade, not the saw itself. So I'm just going to move it in maybe 1/8 of an inch. So this is the smooth side that I just cut. I'm going to put that up against the fence and I'm going to put that through. You see how that's kind of jerky? And it's not sliding good? I haven't waxed the top of this saw yet. I wanted to use it as it came. And it's not the smoothest surface, but if you wax that, it'll make it a lot smoother. And wax it when it needs it, but at least once a year. Okay, so let's do another cut. You'll see that as I push on this, I can hold the stick in here, and that works until I get up to those. And then I've actually got to get my stick back in under there until the end of the board goes past the blade. Not going to be very fun. And I actually think that worked out pretty good. There was no binding. That was good. That means the saw, the blade, and this are most likely parallel. Okay, so one cut doesn't tell you everything about the saw, but I like what I'm seeing in that there was no binding. Worked out pretty good. There was no kickbacks on it. So seems to be fairly well. This is cheap pine. It can actually flex a little as it comes in and out. But the saw actually is pretty stable to not be screwed down to the table. So I think this is going to work out okay. I'm not wild, still not wild about this. But it's usable, and you notice when I was cutting I had to lift this up so I could see the blade. That's set on 1 inch. If you do a cut that's any narrower than that, I have to set these wings on top of the fence or take that off completely. Now normally I wouldn't care to take it off, but now that it has dust collection, I really do want it to stay on. I'm happy with this saw. I think if you got the standard T-track, that would be, that it would fit here okay. Without getting that T-track, I'm not going to know how it's going to work. I did create a 3D printer model that fits that perfectly. No slop whatsoever. The problem is, I can only print it in PLA. I need to print it in PETG. It's a lot harder. PLA will work, but you might get some flex in that over time. But PETG, I don't think you would. It's just different types of plastic. Okay, so if you like the videos, please subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.